Welcome, ACSA family and friends, to Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. As always, Wes Smith, honored to serve each and every one of you. And it's an exciting night for me. We're going to be talking about something we think is really important, reopening, the story that changes by the minute. We'll talk about some of that tonight. But I also get to have on three friends that have been colleagues and friends of mine since really the very beginning. They're people that I look up to, respect, and learn from. And so I'm hoping that's your experience as well. But we'll get to them in just a second. Wanted to make you aware of a couple things that are going on this week. Tomorrow, we have what we call the ACSA Campus Tour. And we have Don Austin from Palo Alto. He's going to be sharing some of their loss of learning interventions and some of the work they're doing there to make sure that their students don't fall behind. And then on Wednesday, we have our ACSA legislative lunch break. A great thing to do while you're having lunches. Watch ACSA. And we have John Fensterwald from EdSource this week. So tune into both of those. But hey, let's jump right into tonight's topic, and that's reopening safely. And we've got three guests, as I said, who have different experiences and different plans. And so we'll let them share those in just a second. But tonight we have Jim Cloney from Shasta Union High School District. We have Jose Gonzalez from Planada Elementary School District and Socorro Shiels from Sonoma Valley Unified. So we have the elementary, high school, unified experience. And again, we've been talking about this for months now, that absent the state making decisions and leading, the leadership has been left to you at the local level to make decisions about closure, to make decisions about reopening, loss of learning, providing meals. They've all landed on your plate. And so months ago, the ACSA Superintendency Council knew that the state, if they were going to get to it, wouldn't get to it anytime soon. And they didn't. So they decided we should put a work group together to study reopening. What are other states doing? What are other countries doing? What are the things we have to think about? Could we suggest some models for reopening and the considerations within each of those models? And then something really grew out of that was the group also came together and said, and we need to make some demands of the system about high quality synchronous instruction, about meeting the needs of equity and making sure that our underserved student populations don't fall further behind. And we were the only group to do that. And the three people on the call, video, whatever this is live, they were a part of this work. So they were three of those folks that stood up and said, we are going to use our expertise about teaching and learning and school design to do this work. And now they're here to share some of that and what their plans are. So let's get into that work they did on the reopening. I'm going to ask each of them, as they went into that reopening work, was there some topic that was really important to them to express, to advocate for, or to learn about? And when they were doing the work, did they have one of those moments like, I never thought about that. It's not something I'd ever thought about. And they learned through the process, because we're hearing all over the state. People are learning things they never thought they needed to know in this work. So let's start off with Socorro. Socorro, when you went into this work, what was one of the topics you were really passionate about getting in front of your colleagues?
Hi, Wes. Thank you. I want to first thank ACSA for everything you guys have done. I think you have been a lifeline for all of us and a connector of knowledge and information that in this time, without a resource like this, I think we'd all be flying even more blindly than we're flying now. And so I really want to call out and appreciate and share gratitude for all that ACSA has done for all of us in the state. I think working with the task force for me, and it was before kind of the more pronounced Black Lives Matter moment we're having right now, but I think we all recognized that it was a moment of disruption that we needed to take advantage of for our students, that we really needed to, it was one thing in March when it hit us by surprise, but now moving forward, we really needed to be able to define high quality instruction, what that looks like, and minimize the variance across the state of how we were doing this work for the sake of our students, for the sake of our staffs, and for the sake of our systems. So I think that was really important to do, and I appreciate the leadership that ACSA showed in all of those conversations at every level with the governor, with the state board, and all of those areas. And I think what I learned, I think I was a resistor to the hybrid model, and I'm sure we'll circle back around to that, because it just logistically, it's so redonkulous. I mean, it's so messy. It's so hard for families. It's hard for the system. And so in our conversations about that, that forced me to attend to all of the issues in the hybrid situation. Really, the logistical level and specificity we had to have for the sake of our students and staff and their safety, and then thus the safety of our community, from turning on the water fountains and what it looked like on the bus and all of the things that you think about but I hadn't seen on paper in one place together. And so those specifics were really important for me to begin to frame with my staff, because part of the whole issue with the pandemic, it's been so big, you don't know where to start. And so these conversations really gave us a concrete starting point, which was really important for us as an organization. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I mean, you've been a part of this whole process. The three of you and so many others are amazing thought partners for us. And, you know, we called out and made demands in our call to action. We wanted the state to step up. While we didn't want to take away your ability to make decisions at the local level, we're not public health experts. And so you talked about the variance, and that's exactly what we're afraid of, is that these issues then become hyper politicized depending upon those local dynamics, which we'll get into a little bit later. So we wanted to protect folks from that. And we're hearing rumors that the governor may be close to making an announcement on face masks that will take you out of that political conversation. And we've been asking for that all along. So thank you. Jose, what about you? What, going into it, something that you were really passionate about engaging in that work?
Just to echo Socorro's sentiments, thank you, Wes and ACSA, for allowing me to join the courageous leaders that you assembled through that particular task force. The thought partners, the thought exchanges that occurred brought us together in not only the educational but the social inequities that our students were facing pre COVID-19, but just exacerbated post or during the pandemic and the closures. Like Socorro, the variability in the reopening plans brought to light, not only for me, but for the community, that we as a district, we as a learning community had a moral imperative to do everything in our power to return to a full open and do everything we could as close to full open 5 days a week as possible. The more we dove into an AB or half day, I just you know, we serve a community of 95% unduplicated count of students, and in order for us to re-energize our learning community and our workforce and address the learning gaps, we needed to come full circle and fully reopen. So that was one of the takeaways for me personally, was to really assess all of the options that were presented and the various blueprints, but came back and we needed to try to go full bore as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, you mentioned the group that we're able to bring together. I just want to remind our members and those that are tuning in that we tried to bring a broad-based coalition into the room, where CASA was represented and CAUSA was represented, and county offices were represented. And I just want to thank all of you for that representation. And you know, Jose, you and the work that CAUSA has been doing for years was really important for us to consider as we did this. Jim, how about you? When you came into this process, did you have a disposition or a bias, something you really wanted to work on?
You know, well, first, and I don't want to repeat all the accolades, but they're all there. I really appreciate being involved and appreciate being asked to be involved, because for those of you familiar with, we're up in Redding in the far north part of the state. And anytime I get a chance to get involved with ACSA, it's always a great learning experience and always a great chance for me to see what's really going on behind the curtain in the rest of the state. So I always jump at that chance. So really it was just exciting from that standpoint. The one thing I remember that just jumped off the page to me as far as takeaways go in all the different options. And maybe Socorro and Jose will remember this the way I did, but in all of our various plans, there was this one line that said special education. And we were just really lacking and underprepared, in my opinion, on what we were going to do with those most, needy kids with IEPs and special needs, and how we were going to work them into whatever plan we're ever to put on place, whether it's hybrid or distant or full return, that those students were going to present some unique challenges. And that's an area that I had not put a lot of thought into going into that discussion, but certainly came away thinking, oh my goodness, we've got to start working on this now, because those are going to be really just difficult students to serve. And we've got to put our best foot forward and do the best plan we can for those kids. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. That we not only were underprepared as a profession to deal with it then, we're not much better prepared now, months later, to engage that. We're trying to help at the state level with working with O'Donnell, trying to get AB 1384 out there to limit some of that legal liability for you folks, so that as you do the best you can for your students, that you're not suffering legal jeopardy as well. So we're working in that regard. Well, let's dive into the plans. So you were part of that work group that made the call to action, that put the models together, that had the essential commitments around equity, synchronous learning, all those things we know are important for our students. And now you've had to develop the plans. And so curious if you could share, again, today, because maybe tonight it changes again, but today, right now, what is your plan for reopening? We've also had lawyers on and other folks talking about the MOU process, whether, if as long as it's not prohibited by your collective bargaining agreement, do you have to do this? We certainly believe you have to work with your labor allies, whatever that looks like, either through an MOU or just a process of collaboration, and then bargain the effect, of course, when we implement these plans. So I'd be curious what your plan is, and where are you in that process of working with labor? So Jim, we'll start with you this time. Where is Shasta Union in this? Again, tonight.
Tonight, yeah. Well, we've been engaged throughout, meeting with both a reopening group, which is a combination of administrators, teacher leaders, all different stakeholders. In addition to having our labor partners in that meeting, we'd also have separate meetings with them and talk about the process throughout. So, timing wise, this discussion couldn't be better. We had some of our final meetings today. We have a board meeting tomorrow evening where I'll be laying out some options. If I can get consensus from our board on how we're going to approach this, then we'll be releasing that information to our community later this week and start moving, toward the school year. So we've got about 4 weeks left. We want to give ourselves a little bit of time for parents to make choices. Not that we're going to offer a wide variety, but we do know some families are going to have to react to what we have to say and make some decisions. So like many districts, we're looking at it in terms of phases or stages, with, the top end, phase 4, being return to normal. And we all know that may mean a vaccine or whatever. Phase 3 is a full return. The big caveat there is face coverings for everybody: teachers, students, custodians, everybody, administrators for sure. Phase 2 is the hybrid and the blend, and we can talk about that, what it looks like for us. And then, of course, phase 1 would be back to distance learning, which is where we know we definitely don't want to start and hopefully don't have to go back to. So where I see us going, because we are in an area with pretty low infection, our total cases in the county right now are just over 200. Thankfully, we have very few hospitalizations, and thankfully, we have very few deaths. So the hospitalizations and the unfortunate death total are the metrics that we're really trying to focus on with public health in terms of what do we need to do. We are experiencing a growth just like everybody else in California in terms of count right now, but it's been a measured growth. It's not been an exponential growth. And so as long as we feel we can stay on that measured growth path, we are confident we're going to open in phase 3, which again, full reopen, all students, 5 days, with heavy emphasis on face coverings and heavy emphasis on social distancing. Luckily, our local public health folks have been really helpful in terms of the social distancing numbers. They're not stuck on that 6 foot number. They give us some flexibility to go down to 3 feet in some circumstances. So we think we can put together a program that's safe and really, emphasize sanitization, face coverings, and distancing, and get all kids in school. That is our plan and I know I joked earlier, 5:45 on Monday evening. That is the plan. Talk to me at 5:45 tomorrow. We'll see.
or in the morning. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thanks for that. And it's interesting, as you're saying, there are different variables around the state, and you're looking at those variables. They're not the same for you in Shasta County as they are in Los Angeles County with the spikes and the numbers. Heard a superintendent recently of a unified district say, the blended or hybrid works for elementary, doesn't work for high school. And that's their opinion. Although you've got a plan, hopefully it becomes a plan realized where at the high school level, there is blended learning. And we certainly know that students are going to do much better when we get back to in-person instruction for them, academically, socially, emotionally. So we're all hopeful we can get there. Jose, how about you? Elementary district, what's your plan? What's your idea? And how's the process going for you? And let me just remind folks that are watching, put your questions in the comment section. We'll try to put them here at the end or throughout if we can. But there's a chance for us to engage those questions. Just put them in the chat box. Jose, go ahead. What's your plan and where are you in the process?
So as of 11:59 this morning, we were ready to reopen 5 days a week. And then we got the governor's news. Merced County is on the watch list. And so all indoor activities have since been suspended. But our plan, we were following, again, we too had a good partnership with Department of Public Health. We actually adopted the ACSA model for the 20 school districts in our county, and we presented our reopening plan to the Department of Public Health. We didn't have time to wait and adjust master schedules and all of the planning that goes into kicking off a school year. So we presented our plan. We presented our non-negotiables, and they were extremely flexible, just like Jim mentioned. They've allowed a 3-foot distancing between desks. We'll maintain 6-foot distance between students and staff. Face coverings are recommended in TK through 3, and we have mandated them in grades 4 through 8. That is where we have a little bit of a bigger challenge to socially distant students. In addition, a big game changer for us was we couldn't have 6-foot distancing in buses. And so they allowed two students per seat as long as they're masked. So again, we made, given that transportation is a privilege and not a right, as long as they're masked, they allowed us to have two students per seat. And so the caveat with minimizing to 3 feet and adding the masking is as long as we were cohorted and we had a tracing plan, that the Department of Public Health eased up some of the regulations. However, with that being said, we did present the tentative plan 2 weeks ago at our last board meeting, and now we're beginning to pivot a little bit, mainly because of the response from our learning community. In mid-June, we were looking at 75 to 80% of our students or our parents were going to be sending kids back. As of this morning, we're down to 50%. So our learning community has completely pivoted. I think just the national, local, state attention that this has been garnering has really shifted their vision and what they had hoped school was going to look like.
No, thanks. And you've answered some of the questions. People were asking about the 3 feet distance and who approved that. And certainly that's got to be a public health decision. As we've been saying, we're not public health experts. And that's happened around the state as well. Other counties have said with accommodations, and you mentioned, Jose, some of those, the face masks, the cohorts, that the distance could be shorter than 6 feet, but not all counties are of that disposition. Curious too, as you share your hybrids, if you're all doing something like Palo Alto where they have an A/B schedule. The students are split in half. They go 2 days a week. The other group goes the other 2 days a week, and then the fifth day they rotate so that it's 3 weeks. 3 days 1 week, 2 weeks, or 2 days the next week, kind of thing. So if that's your model, just let the folks know as well. Socorro, how about you? What's the plan? Where are you in the process?
Well, I think Sonoma County is a different bird. We were one of the first counties to go into lockdown, and so we have a much more specific view of how to handle the pandemic, I would say. And masks are required of anybody over 2 6 feet is the requirement for students and for staff. And so we, our version of hybrid, in a good faith effort, we've been looking at kind of how we could make hybrid work. I'm like everybody, like every educator, we believe the best case scenario in a safe situation is when they're with us. However, when we kind of are now, penciling it all out and looking at how this happens, the 3 days not in hybrid with us, because there's no staff, that those are so independent for students. The question is, could we do a much more robust distance learning 2.0 that will provide students with so much more access to education? We have computers for every student. We have Wi-Fi for every student. We were able to do that. In the spring, we have a training program in development. We have ed tech teacher leaders who kind of are paving the way in how to do that. And the teachers, all employees, have been asking questions that I think are very fair about tracing, about testing, where we rely heavily on public health. And while I know they want to do this, I'm not sure they're prepared for the students in Sonoma County to come back, all of our different organizations, all of our different employee pools. And Sonoma County has 40 districts in a relatively small county. And so we really, our communication with our public health officer is a lot, can be challenging. Our county office has taken the lead, of course, to kind of have more consistency. But one of the things we found, and I think the work with ACSA really highlighted it, and I think I'm so appreciative to be able to work with my colleagues, is the variance between public health as well. So not only is there variance, we found out in the spring, grading, instructional minutes, all of those things that happened during that version of different distance learning, now we have this variance in how public health officials view the world and what that means. And so for us a month ago, I would have said we were probably starting in hybrid, and that's where we were focusing our efforts and we were getting ready and really doing a good faith effort. And when we present to the board next week, I think when it pencils out, I think for us, what might be best for students and certainly best for the health and safety of our staff and students might be a full distance learning model for perhaps a month, if not longer, as we figure that out. And I think those issues about how will we know when it's safe enough to bring people back, and those are the types of conversations that I hope statewide we can have a clear decision-making model, because that isn't the type of thing where I, as a superintendent and educator, feel comfortable saying I know what the science is saying. We've said 3 things would guide us: science, safety, and schooling. And schooling is our lane. Totally got it. And safety, even once we know what the parameters are. We have smart people, they'll figure it out. But the science, we really are relying on other people in this government system to figure out what that means and have it make sense for schools. I'm glad people are paying attention now. I wish they were there 2 months ago when we started asking for their help, but we'll take it now.
Socorro, thanks for that. Jim wants to chime in, but before we let him do that, someone asked a question, I think Bhavna did, about middle schools. So when you were planning for the hybrid, what did that look like at the middle school level? It seems like there's a question about how applicable it is for secondary, specifically middle school.
Well, for us, I think that's one of the reasons why the safety issue, we can't cohort. The master schedule demands too much. If we had known maybe months and months ahead of time, we could have planned a master schedule differently. But at the high school and middle school level with a master schedule, it's just nearly impossible to cohort. That's not how students are scheduled. Maybe more possible at the middle school because there isn't so much variation in the types of classes offered, but that's not how we're ready to roll. So we are on a block schedule. We would have done cleaning in between, but not the type of deep cleaning that would have given teachers, I think, comfort that it was really disinfected. And so those are the types of kind of trade-offs we have to consider as we put it all down and what again is penciling out in terms of really being logistically sound. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Jim, you wanted to talk about public health variants and guidance variants. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, just really a comment for those people from Northern California who are on the call tonight. And I have to admit, I don't know exactly which counties are included, but just this week, we were presented with a document that we're calling the Rancho document, and that's the Regional Association of Northern California Health Officers. Our public health officer shared it with us as superintendents. It's 2.5 pages. It's very straightforward. It's where we got I honestly think our best information in terms of our plans for reopen. And so if you're in Northern California County, I would encourage you to ask your public health officer about the Rancho document. And I can share it with you, Wes, and we can put it on the web, put it on the ACSA hub. But it's just very straightforward. I'm not saying all public health officers may be able to follow the guidance we've been given, because again, we're in a rural area with less infection. But we found it really helpful.
Oh, that's great resource, and we'll get that on the resource hub for everybody. We try to put a plug in whenever we can for the hub. Great content there. Nice job. You must be a board member for ACSA. You had ideas for middle school, right? Go ahead, because I think this is a tough one for folks.
Yeah, so at our middle school, we cohorted, so we reduced from 7 periods a day to 3 periods and did a block schedule with 3 different cohorts, identifying separate paths of travel for those students, staggered breaks, staggered lunch. With the flexibility that we received from the National Food Service Program, we weren't running breakfast right at the beginning. Breakfast was going to commence at 8:45 in 15-minute blocks. We needed something to keep those middle school kids occupied, so it was going to be a grab and go during the 15-minute break, and then similar model for lunch and deployment. But we did a cohort down to 3 groups. That was the guidance. Our public health was really against the half day or AB in order to avoid the social mixing before and after school hours.
We're getting, thank you, Jose. We're getting a lot of questions about special education. And Jim, you mentioned this, in a previous comment about the need here and the need we have for support and guidance and direction. Do any of you have an example, they ask, of the plan with regard to significant disabilities and those students with significant needs? So how are the plans fleshing out with regard to that? Socorro, did you want to?
Well, we don't have a clean answer, of course. It is in the forefront of our mind how to make this happen. One of the things I think Sutter and Yuba, perhaps counties, I think at least a week ago, and things changed, so I don't know what's current, talked about bringing back Mod Severe and our most vulnerable students. And that is something we're looking at. We haven't figured out exactly how. And of course, we need to work with our teachers to make sure it's safe. But what we know is it's likely that we'll be able, if we did something like distance learning, perhaps we could open up our facilities for the adults and figure out how to begin to bring back in small, safe cohorts our most vulnerable students. And some of our services, particularly the services that so many of our special education students need, were very difficult to do in a distance learning model. So is there a way to do that in person, in safe ways on our campuses? So we will be looking at that. We don't have an answer. Again, one of the things that I think has been critical from ACSA, from my perspective, is the way in which things are shared. Like Jim just shared about that document, we haven't seen that. Jose has been so gracious sharing his plans with us and given us new mental models to think about. And even though the understanding that every county wasn't doing what we were doing in terms of public health. Like, I didn't realize that at first. I thought there was, a public health manual or something, and they work together, but they might talk, but they don't necessarily make all decisions together. And so I think that's really helpful for us. And like you said, the resource hub, and I'm not an ACSA board member, but I play one on TV. So things like that have been incredible for us, and the sharing amongst colleagues, because we're all trying to figure out how to communicate this in the best way so that it's understandable, that it's meaningful, that every student is getting what they need, from our English learners to our special education. And I think we have very talented staff that will leave everything on the table to make that true for students.
Awesome. Jose, you wanted to address this important question too. So go ahead.
Just briefly, we, as I mentioned, we were ready to go full bore, and then we received the news from the governor this afternoon. We had a task force meeting this afternoon, and we have roughly between 30 and 40 stakeholders that are part of this meeting, and we started to discuss our going full distance learning, and this was the number one topic, is how do we address the needs of our most vulnerable population. And so what we discussed is, in conversation with our labor partners, we're going to be asking distance learning be delivered from their classroom. So we want all faculty, all staff. So then that led to, how do we replicate the special ed model and create individualized learning plans for all of our students? We're going to have the time. We'll provide our faculty with the necessary planning and guidance, and to help address our tier 2, our tier 3, our special ed students, address some of the learning loss that we've experienced during the closure. So we plan to bring small cohorts of students, 3 to 5, do some small group instruction a couple times a week, in addition to the distance learning.
For that, we've got a ton of great questions. I don't think we've had this many questions at any of the broadcasts. So you're either confusing the hell out of everybody, or they're really, really engaging the content, because we've got a ton of questions. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. We're trying to get to the spirit of most of them. I want to do just 2 things. We're over, so we're going to go rapid fire. We've been telling the state they need to step up, provide you support, right? So if you had a magic wand, right, you could have the state do anything. Complete this sentence for me. In the next few weeks, the governor, legislature, and state board must blank. Jim, finish that sentence.
Get us enough PPE to open safely. I hate a mask. You hate a mask. We all hate a mask, but we have to wear a mask to get back into school. And I will wear a mask, and I ask our families to wear masks. So get us enough. Jose,
how about you?
Experts, and put out a common message.
And I think you said the standards and then a common message. Is that what you said at the beginning? I missed the first part.
They need to come together and provide just one common message. Follow the science, follow the experts, listen to our medical experts, and give us one message.
Socorro, how about you? What must they do?
Of course, I have 2 things. So really quickly, like Jose said, they have to provide a structure for decision making for reentry. One that, no matter where you are in the state, the logic plays out. And the second one is really, for the sake of our students, to find high quality distance learning. So we're all shooting for the same goal. Even with the variance within our districts, we all need the same vision of where we're going. And that needs to come from the state.
Last thing. We use this platform to encourage people, to inspire people, to give people hope. I've told people since we closed our schools that we're not only going to survive this, we're going to thrive because of this, coming together, working together. If someone asked me, why do you have hope, Wes, given everything we just heard tonight, I would point to the 3 of you and all your colleagues that you represent. I have hope and faith in this system because of leaders like you that have the courage to stand up for and speak out on behalf of your students and your staff, the adults in your community. So you give me hope. What gives you hope? Socorro, what gives you hope?
I'll say that one of our colleagues at our last message said, and I needed to hear it, and so I'm sure the members of the community that are watching or listening need to hear it. You're the right leader in the right place at the right time. We have an army of colleagues who are ready to answer the call to meet the needs of each and every student in California, and now's the time. There is no greater need than right now for schools to triumph, for districts to triumph, for educators to be revered. And you are in exactly the right place to do that. And together we can.
Perfect. Jose, what gives you hope?
The sense and the beauty of human kindness rising to provide service at every level: social, emotional, child nutrition, adult support, that we have seen from our educators has been extremely uplifting. And just to echo, together we will.
JC, bring us home. What gives you hope?
It's really the same. It's just the renewed faith in our staff to serve kids. And again, like Jose said, at every level, I mean, every sector of our district has stepped up in a different way. And sometimes, I'll be honest, it's easy to get as a superintendent to get a little bit jaded sometimes on things you're dealing with. And this honestly has given me renewed hope in all the people in the district that they're going to want to step up and serve kids.
Right on. Well, I just, lastly, thank you. Thanks to my 3 friends and career-long colleagues. I'm blessed to know you and work with you, and thanks for making time to share what you're working on and what you're learning. Just so you know, those of you that were asking questions about special education, we're trying to pull off a special education expert next Monday night, to talk about from their perspective how we best support those who need us most right now. And so we're looking forward to that. Again, folks, thanks for joining us. Facebook Live, Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. Stay safe, stay well. We'll see you next Monday night.